one of my favorite things to tell people is that, it's equal versus special. I said that earlier. But what I really mean by that is it special treatment for someone to have access to the same building like Jan, or is it equal? And here's a great example. I remember getting a call from a young man who was going to a law school locally here in Halifax. And for those of you who don't know, we're coming to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Hello out west. And we wanted to, he called me because he was really facing a lot of barriers to getting things done. And he had to finish a paper and get a reference book from our main library, which this many years ago was in the year 99, to be honest, fair to our library system. It wasn't accessible in 99, our main library. He required a book from the library, just like everybody else, but you couldn't take it out. It was one of those reference books. You take what you want from it. The teacher is curious as to what you draw from it, and that's part of how the paper is marked. He called me because he was so frustrated. His friend was kind enough to drive him to the library. Like I said, just because you use a wheelchair does not mean you don't know how to get from point A to B. Usually you do. It's the barriers we put in front of people that make it challenging. So there he was at the bottom of 8 big stairs, looking up from his wheelchair, wondering how he was going to get to that book. Now, he really had 3 good choices. Choice 1, well, I could just tell my teacher I couldn't do it, couldn't get to the book. Clearly imperfect. Choice 2, well, there's a lot of good citizens, the Maritimers, we're known for our hospitality. Perhaps if he waited long enough, some nice people would come, carry him in, and then, of course, waited again in the library. Perhaps people would come and carry him out. But he was over 300 pounds, and that wasn't a great option. I know I wouldn't have been offering.
Right.
And then, the truth be told, his third option was to allow his friend that brought him, who, by the way, was a B student versus his A student average, to do the work for him. But then he's actually sacrificing potentially his mark. So clearly none of these options was perfect. In fact, none of them were even acceptable. And again, this is where dignity comes in. So my question to you and to all of our listeners, and the question I ask everybody to ask those people around them, let's start that revolution with a question. And the question is it equal access to that building? Does he deserve that? Or is it special treatment that he gets to that book just like everybody else?
Interesting. It's an interesting topic. It's interesting terminology.
And it's really important that we talk about the concept of equal. And when I say equal, I truly mean fair and equitable, but it just doesn't roll off my tongue the same way as equal versus special. So forgive me, those of you who know the difference. But when we talk about equal versus special, we really are talking about fair and equitable. Because sometimes equal, frankly, is inequitable. Hard to say that, but trust me on it.
Mm-hmm. But then we get into a little bit of a debate where special for some individuals means extra because we're equalizing the playing field, and because the different accessibility issues are not in place and things need to be changed, then why does society look at it as special? These are special things that need to be done so other individuals can have equality.
Right, because when you don't require it, you think of it as special. I remember one time working with someone who has visual impairment, and really his only requirement was to be near a window because natural light was important. He also had migraine issues. So natural light versus all that horrible fluorescent light that we all know gives anybody a good headache. But the truth was, we made an adjustment just to have him sit in a corner. But everyone in his office didn't understand why this person got the nice corner seat by the window. And they really were very unhappy. And really, people ask me all the time, so whose responsibility is that, Tova, to deal with that issue? And I always say the managers. The culture starts from the top. And in that particular office, the manager did a wonderful thing to hire a person with disability and include them and equalize the playing field. But by not explaining that to the coworkers, not providing disability awareness training, perhaps not even just stopping and telling everybody this is what's going to happen, those that are affected by it, or perhaps someone was moved, you're going to create coworker resentment that didn't need to be there. And that's not lack of sensitivity. That's actually lack of awareness.
And lack of knowledge.
And lack of knowledge. And our goal with the Inclusion Revolution is to provide tools to our listeners, ensure that they pass it on, because that's how you start a revolution, and to bring as much cutting-edge information and support, positive ideas, success stories, best practices, as we've talked about before. For instance, a great example of some ways of avoiding that kind of trouble in the workplace, like having that person sitting by the window like we talked about and everybody getting upset, is to do some basic things with your workforce. I call it how to avoid negative attitudes and stereotypes. And really, I have like 5 or 6 steps that I'm going to share with you right now. Number 1, and it'll always be number 1, and that is provide disability awareness training for all staff. Number 1, without the information, again, it's not a lack of sensitivity, it's a lack of awareness. Number 2, it's always important for the upper management to spearhead the campaign, to be aware and support an atmosphere of learning and comfort. In other words, if you're serious about inclusion of persons with disabilities in your workplace, you're going to want to make sure that that starts from the top. I like to say the fish stinks from the head, and I know out west sometimes I get a lot of curious looks. For those of you Maritimers, I think you know what I mean. But the truth is the fish stinks from the head, and we have to consider that this management is spearheading this campaign of awareness and support. Additionally, I always support inviting questions. Let people address their fears. Let them ask you the questions. You'll be glad they did, because that's how we change thinking and we take stigma out of the game. Additionally, I always suggest promoting and taking part in disability events. What I mean by that is creating an office culture that's aware and involved, whether that's the CIBC Run for the Cure or a number of fantastic events that happen here in Nova Scotia and across the country. The important thing is to promote and take part in events as an office, to encourage that office culture. I also suggest that offices and businesses keep books and learning tools on hand. I don't mean a huge library, but some basic information, because training is really more than a one-time thing. I can talk about disability awareness training as someone who provides that across the country, but without that follow-up, that what I call leave behind and remind, things can disappear, like we've all been through those one-day sessions when we're so inspired. Then we walk out, the next day we wake up and go, what was that they said that I thought was so important? So I'm very committed to offices taking the lead in materials being available around disability. And finally, I think you have to partner with local agencies wherever you are in the country and demystify disability. Perhaps have a lunch and learn and have different disability groups come in and talk about some of the more misunderstood disabilities, such as mental health. When somebody hears the word schizophrenia, they cross the street. But do they really know what's happening for that person? And I think by demystifying disability, we really are creating an atmosphere of inclusion. And these are just some of the basic tips I might give a manager who's got an issue with someone with visual impairment sitting by a window and everybody wondering why he got the good seat. I just thought that's a great example of some of the material we're going to be sharing with our listeners. For instance, oh, did I go too long? You want to do that up in the next few months? And we really look forward to seeing you both. Find us on VoicePrint. Also in the Halifax area, I know that we're going to be televised on Eastlink Television. We're excited about that. For those of you in the Halifax area, you can find us also on Eastlink. And I know that one of the things that Inclusion Revolution is committed to, as I said, was cutting-edge information. And Paul, you're going to be working, I know, throughout the week to continually collect the most recent information on disability issues and perhaps some of the cutting-edge approaches to inclusion of persons with disabilities across Canada. And I guess I should say, when I talk about definitions and disabilities, I'm inclusive of all types. We would call ourselves cross-disability focused, meaning inclusive of people who live with cognitive, physical, invisible, and mental, emotional, as well as sensory disabilities. So we are truly inclusive. And we really look forward to all of our listeners being part of this revolution by not only telling other people what they hear, but also letting us know about what's important. And I know, Paul, you're going to talk a lot about the ways they're going to be able to find us, both on radio as well as just through email and calling us, and making sure that we're listening to the voice of the people and getting the right messages out there and answering the questions that you have. And because I've mentioned some of our upcoming shows, Paul, I certainly look forward to sending people to our inclusionrevolution.com website, and that website's going to be a real resource. Like I said, a clearinghouse in a sense. I know Paul's been working very hard creating a lot of resources on it. The health news that you're going to hear on the show is also going to be on the website. We're going to update it every single week for you. We're going to give you a guide to hearing archived shows, which is really going to our friends at VoicePrints online, but we're going to have a link to that as well. And I know one of the most important things with this website is also to provide you links to relevant information and places to go to solve some of the issues that we may not be addressing in obviously